Hello everyone, and welcome to my talk about running your tests faster with Heroku CI and Salesforce DX. My name is Arthur Louie. I'm a software engineer at Salesforce. I work in the Heroku product area. Now, before I begin, just a quick note that you should base your purchasing decisions on products and services that are currently available. So why should you attend this talk? You should attend this talk if you're interested in Heroku apps that interact with Salesforce. Perhaps you have such an app already that's built on Heroku that interacts with Salesforce, or maybe you're thinking of writing your own. And along with that app, you'll want to have a lot of automated tests, and you are very interested in running those automated tests efficiently. So a little bit about me. I'm an engineer on the Heroku Connect team. This is what the user interface of our product looks like. It syncs data between a Salesforce org and a database that's hosted on Heroku called Heroku Postgres. It's part of the Heroku product family, but it also runs on top of the Heroku platform, just like your app would run on Heroku. And it also calls Salesforce APIs, just like your apps would call Salesforce APIs to do whatever awesome stuff your apps would do. So this isn't a talk about the benefits of Heroku Connect. We've got a lot of talks at Dreamforce about that. But rather, it's more of a case study about my team that happens to be building an app on Salesforce, or on Heroku that interacts with Salesforce, had an automated test suite, and we used some techniques that I'll describe to you to really speed up those tests to make things a lot more productive for developers. So to run our tests, we use Heroku CI. This is a test runner for Heroku. It's similar to Travis CI and Circle CI. The advantage of it on Heroku is that your test environment pretty much mirrors your production environment. It's nicely integrated with GitHub and Heroku pipelines. You can see the screenshot there where it's a status of a pull request on GitHub. And there's a green check mark that says the Heroku CI tests pass. So you can set things up so that in GitHub, if your tests pass, that's the only way you can merge a pull request. And you can also set things up so that tests run every time you push a branch up. So Heroku CI is great and all, but we had a big problem back in February. You can see the date there, February 7th. We had written so many tests that our test suite was just painfully slow. So it was taking almost 24 minutes to run the entire thing. And so you can imagine how frustrated that was for the development team. We would have to, we'd be working on a pull request, we'd push it up, and then we'd have to wait 24 minutes to get some results to get a bit of confidence that our changes weren't going to break anything. On the bright side, it was the perfect amount of time to catch up on our favorite TV shows. So, Netflix was great for this. 24 minutes for an episode of Full House. So, what was causing our tests to run so slowly? Why was it taking 24 minutes? It was mostly what we call end-to-end integration tests, and that's at the very top of this pyramid here. These tests are very important because they allow us to verify holistic behavior of the system. So they test things typically from the front-end UI all the way down to the back-end database. And they're valuable, but they take a lot of time. And we didn't have very many of them. That's why it's so small at the top of the pyramid there. But they did take forever to run. In our case, they were slow because they were interacting with Salesforce. We were making Salesforce API calls to set up data, to sync data back and forth, and it just takes time because we are, calling out via APIs. We also had a lot of API tests and unit tests, but those run quickly, and so they formed the bulk of our tests, the unit tests and the API tests. But it was the end-to-end tests that were causing the bottlenecks in the system. And it wasn't just that we had slow tests, it was the way that we were running them. So we used to run them serially. In fact, we still do run them serially. We had unit tests, API tests, and end-to-end tests, and we ran them one after another. For the Salesforce end-to-end tests, we had to set up a pool of pre-configured test orgs. So this is something that we did independently. We set up around 10 test orgs, and those got reused. So you can see let's say you had a branch there. For branch 1, you'd have a bunch of Salesforce tests and unit tests, API tests, all running against the same Salesforce org. So every test run got its own Salesforce org, and so if you had another branch, another developer pushes another branch, then they'd have another Salesforce org that they use, Salesforce org 2, let's say. And so we'd have 10 of those, and then once we got to the 11th test run, we'd have to cycle back to the first test org because we just had a finite number of them. And so this test org reuse caused a big problem as well. We had to make sure that our tests cleaned up after themselves when they created records. And when we didn't do that correctly, bad things would happen. Sometimes we'd even get these flaky tests that would pass sometimes and fail other times. And that was really frustrating for us. We didn't get a lot of confidence out of our tests that way. So along came 2 features that really saved us and got us out of this messy situation. They were parallel tests from Heroku CI and scratch orgs from Salesforce DX. So first, parallel tests. This is a relatively new feature of Heroku CI. The idea is simple. Instead of running your tests serially, you can run them in parallel. So you can set it up to run tests on as many as 16 test nodes, and each of those nodes runs your tests concurrently. So you would split up your test suite into, a number of different nodes, and all of them run at the same time. If they all pass, then you get a green status. If something fails, then you get a failed result. So that's great, but that alone wasn't enough because the Salesforce integration tests were still a problem. In fact, they were an even bigger problem if we were to use this feature just as it is, because you can see here, this one test run, it has several nodes. Some of them hit Salesforce. If they're all hitting the same Salesforce org, then you're going to get even more problems with tests overlapping, interfering with each other. Thankfully, Salesforce DX has a great feature called scratch orgs. And scratch orgs are disposable Salesforce orgs. You can create them on demand. And so they were just what we needed, because any test node that hit Salesforce would create its own scratch org. So in this example, you can see we've got our one branch. It has a bunch of nodes, some of which hit Salesforce. Everyone that hits Salesforce, they create a scratch org. And for another branch from another pull request, they would also create their own scratch orgs. So instead of having one test that uses one Salesforce org, in this example, we've got one test that uses 6 Salesforce orgs and another 6 Salesforce orgs, and they're all independent of each other. So there's no interference between tests. So that was the idea that we had, and now I'm going to show you how we rolled up our sleeves and got it done. So when you use Salesforce DX, there are a couple of prerequisites. You need to enable the Dev Hub and set up the Salesforce CLI. I noticed that the next presentation is going to be all about the Salesforce CLI, so if you're interested in that, please stick around. You also need to create a connected app so that your automated tests can authenticate without any human interaction. So to do the connected app, there's a screenshot of the interface from the Salesforce UI. This down here says use digital signatures. It's the last checkbox there, and that's very important for this JWT step. When you use a digital signature, you supply a private key, and all those instructions are well documented online. So once you create that connected app in Salesforce, you need 2 things from it. You need your client ID, which I have there, CISF client ID. That is the config variable that I will store it in. So in Heroku CI, you can have these test-only config variables. I'm going to show you a script right after this, so that's why I've sort of put the name of the variable there. And you also need the private key file that you use to generate your digital certificate. So like I said, the client ID is very easy. It's a string, so you just put it in a config variable. The private key is a little more difficult because you can't just store it in source control because it's a private key. It's sensitive information, and you also can't put it in a config variable because it's a binary file. So the technique that we use to store this key is that we encrypt the key and store the encrypted version in source control. And when we encrypt it, we have a secret key that we use. And it's that secret key that we set in a CI-only config variable. So there's that at the bottom, CI secret key. That denotes the key that we use to encrypt this file. So I'm going to show you this script. Let's see. It's a little difficult for me to know where my cursor is here. Just give me 1 second. Slideshow. Okay, so I've got the script. This is the actual script that my team uses, and you can see that the first step is to decrypt this this private key that I was talking about. So we use this OpenSSL utility. We give it the secret key, and we pass as an input the encrypted version of the server key, and out comes the unencrypted version. So that's stored on the file systems at server.key. Next, we have to authorize the org, and so we use the sfdx command, force auth jwt grant, give it the client ID from the connected app, and then give it the server key as well. And then we do some settings, we do some config setting, and then we create the scratch org, deploy the metadata to it, and assign a permission set, and off we go. So that's what the script does. I'm gonna run it because I just want to show you how long it takes in CI. So I'm just gonna run the script really quickly. So it's authorizing using the JWT flow that we talked about. So it's authorized now, and now it's creating the scratch org. So in Heroku CI, every node is going to be doing this. So it adds this much time to every test run. So it created the scratch org. It deployed some metadata to set up custom objects and other things in the org. So it did that. It's applying the permission set and deleting the key file. And then it says it's updating a file with some scratch org settings. So what that did is the last step. I just have some commands here that uses this org display JSON command from SFDX, and it gets the access token, instance URL, and org ID for for your tests to use. So your tests use these variables to log into Salesforce, and then just make Salesforce API calls. So I'm just going to see one thing. Okay, and so another step you need to do to set this up on Heroku is that you need to update the app.json file that describes your app's metadata. So you've got this command here. You set a build pack. You don't have to do this, but it's highly recommended because this Salesforce CLI build pack gives you SFDX, that's a Salesforce CLI, and the JQ utility for parsing JSON right off the bat. So you can just run those commands on your Heroku dyno. You set the number of test nodes that you want in this quantity field, and then and then you've got a test setup and test commands that actually that's what gets run on your test nodes to execute your tests. So putting it all together, a test run can have up to 16 test nodes. Each test node has an index variable so that it knows which node it is. So in 16, you've got like from test node 1 to test node 16. And so you can use that index to control which tests to run if you want to sort of manually split up your test suite. So that's what we did on my team. We split the test suite so that we analyzed things so that the longest running tests would all run in parallel. And an added benefit of that is that because the scratch orgs are disposable, there was no test cleanup needed. So that actually gave us a performance boost as well, because we were able to delete a lot of test cleanup code, and that made things run even faster. So here are the results. It was really awesome. Remember that it took 24 minutes before, and parallelizing the test suite brought it down to under 4 minutes. So no more Netflix watching, but we were still just thrilled at this. I guess this is a 6-time improvement here. So just in closing, Heroku CI can be used to parallelize your test suite. You really want to use it in tandem with Salesforce DX and Scratch orgs if you are interacting with Salesforce. And to optimize your test suite, you'll want to do some analysis, and so that you can identify your longest running tests and run them in parallel. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I just wanted to plug the keynote for the developer or for the developer talk. It's Thursday at 1 p.m. We hope you can join us. There's a lot of great information about Heroku, Salesforce DX, and a lot of other things platform related. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them up at the front. Probably would be best.